conflict. It is about Elon. I don't know if you saw that he's being sanctioned by the EU for propagating
Yes,
disinformation,
I saw that.
which is kind of cool. I think it's kind of interesting.
Or warned, right?
Yeah, it's warned. It's warned to be fined. It's if he had 24 hours to put a stop to it, I believe, and if he didn't, then there would be then he would be fined, or at least there would be some sort of sanction. Which is interesting. I just couldn't believe that the EU has that kind of those kinds of laws, actually, because we're in America, and not that we're no bastion of corporate governance, but I was just surprised at how swift that comes into play, because we always talk about that. We talk about how the U.S. is so behind when it comes to we're behind when it comes to tech. Like it's like whenever some tech giant gets brought up in front of Congress, it's like who's older kind of game. It's like talking about Napster and like things that happened 33 years ago with the advent of like the modern internet. And so I was just impressed that the EU had laws that were just so up to date, where it's like, okay, you're a social media platform, your a large number of your user base is basically sending out information that is fake, and it could be injurious to some sort of world event that's going on right now. You now have to take action in order to stop it. I could never see a law like that passing in the U.S.
Do you think it's specifically like a social media law?
It might not be. It might not be.
Doesn't Germany have something where they govern how you talk about World War II?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. They do. But you can't like promote Nazism and things of that nature. But I don't believe that this is what that is. I don't think that's what this is coming under. I think this is coming under some sort of.
Well, I'm just saying that at least there's something similar where they have this level of censorship, and
right. I hear what you're saying.
And I don't know. And my point is like, well, if they have that, maybe they have other stuff, and I do not know.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not as surprised, because they do at least have that. But again, that's Germany. That's not all of the EU, right?
That's what I was getting at. I was like, this is the mix of a number of nations that have this accord. I mean, I was surprised. If you're not surprised, that's fine. But that makes sense. I mean, your reasoning makes sense for why you wouldn't be so surprised. But I was the swiftness, the quickness with which they were sort of after him. I was a little like, whoa, that's serious business. I mean, of course, he takes nothing for as serious because he's a man-child, and also like has more money than maybe like 3 of the EU countries put together. But it was he was very tongue-in-cheek about his very cavalier about his sort of. It was basically like, prove it. It's like if my platform is promoting disinformation, prove it. I will say this, that in terms of the not having to prove it, it is widely known that I believe when Elon took over, he gutted a lot of the watchdog like departments within Twitter, now X, that were supposed to be monitoring this sort of thing. I think that they were a lot of those people were let go, either that or they left with his declaration of get. It was like, what was the ridiculousness? It was like, be prepared to be abused, basically, without having to quote him exactly. I'll just say that. Be prepared to work more hours than your pay is commiserate to your pay, basically. So who knows how all those departments left, but there's a sizable chunk of them that are no longer in operation. And people were pointing to that as a reason for why so much disinformation has been allowed to surface on X. But I will also say this: wasn't his whole "you have to pay to be verified" thing supposed to be cutting this back? Was it supposed to be stamping out a lot of disinformation? Apparently, because it's so cheap to get a blue check mark now and anyone can buy it, it is given validity to a lot of accounts that are spreading fake information.
Why would that have stopped anyone?
Well, he said that. He was saying that it's going to help verify and stop bots and basically make sure people are who they say they are. That was the whole point about paying for the blue check mark. And instead, all it's done is basically water down the value of the blue check mark, because before you had to go through a ridiculous onerous process of being a public figure, being well known, having an X number of people following you, it's yada 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 to get the blue check mark. Now, because anybody could just make an account, pay the fee, and be a blue check mark, it's made it much more difficult to say what's the difference between Jake Tapper and like Jake Illinois, with an account, somewhere out in the Maldives saying that I don't know, whatever's fake, just basically information that is just not reliable or transparent or valid with regard to, especially in an emergency situation like what you have going on between Israel and Palestine at the moment.
So yeah, actually, I looked it up too. It's the EU's Digital Services Act. It went into effect on digital online platforms.
Yeah,
August 25th, 2023.
Okay, so they're on it.
Super
so this
new.
Is specific to the internet. I would say that's impressive legislation. It
aims to create a safer digital space.
So I mean that's funny. You were going to be
security.
Like, is this a World War II like holdover? And it's not. It's actually someone being proactive and trying to legislate for the modern age. That's wild. Good on them. Honestly, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Elon doesn't feel that way, but Elon's going to eat it. I'm sure he'll survive.
Looking to make an example of someone.
Yeah, but we all know that there's no price tag high enough to basically make a billionaire squeal. On almost any level, there's a number of examples that you could throw out. But how much could you possibly find Elon Musk to make him say, "Oh man, my bad, terrible on me"? I mean, maybe a little because of how much debt X has taken on. So maybe you could, maybe in this particular instance, it might hurt his pocket, which maybe that's what the EU's getting at. Maybe that's why they're like, we'll make an example of you because we know you're highly leveraged and probably on the verge of having to cry uncle with regard to how you've mismanaged this platform. So maybe that's what's going on there. Who knows? But that was a little bit of interesting news. I thought that was with regard to the old Muscovite.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, we'll see how he squirms out of this one, and I'm pretty sure he will. But I guess we could dream. We could dream it for the moment.
Exactly. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Follow this space.
Yeah, we'll keep on this charge.
All right, so I got an interesting climate topic for you, and it's,
okay.
When I get towards the end of it, it's going to pose a question, and I honestly don't know if I have an answer. So I'm really curious to see what you think, and listeners, what you guys think. So I guess if I was to title this segment, maybe with a question: how do we manage Earth's resources to combat climate change? Now that sounds broad, but it's going to get very specific very quickly. So a little bit of context here. Most people have heard of biodiversity, especially if you've listened to this podcast. We talk about it a lot, but I, for one, have never heard of the term geodiversity, right? Never heard of geodiversity before. You can kind of imagine what it is. But if biodiversity is diversity of life, geodiversity is the term used to describe non-living geological diversity. For example, soil is part of Earth's geodiversity, and the microorganisms living inside the soil are part of the planet's biodiversity. Life can't survive without geodiversity. More to that point, geodiversity is a major factor in climate change, influencing it in several ways, including natural carbon sinks, which store carbon dioxide, disaster reduction, right? Geological foundations allow us to construct structures resilient to various hazards, and biodiversity. Geology defines and shapes our ecosystems that biodiversity adapts to and evolves with. And that brings us to resource extraction, because when we ignorantly or irresponsibly extract Earth's physical structure and substance, we disrupt the processes that act on it, which leads to broken ecosystems and biodiversity loss, right? So does that all kind of make sense so far?
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
All right, good. Just want to make sure we're following. I'm trying to dumb it down as much as I can, and just
You're trying to make it
simple
clear.
understand.
Let's not say not dumb it down. We're just trying to be
Well, it's just
explicit
a couple
and
articles that
simplify.
were pretty scientific. So I'm trying to bring it down to a level that people like us can understand. Because I had to read it a few times.
You're trying to decant the information. I'm quoting that
Distill
phrase.
Distill it.
But in the decanter, that's what you should say. Welcome everyone to the decanter. In fact, that's what you should kind of call the segment. You should be like, it's a decanting corner.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what we should have called the pod.
That's not bad. It's not bad. If only we were experts. Go on.
Okay. So, right. So what we were just kind of talking about is we have all this geodiversity, but a lot of that geodiversity we extract. And if we don't do it right, we can really damage life on this planet. So why do we extract Earth's resources? You may think of a few things, but it actually, when they started listing all of the ways that we disrupt geodiversity, I was like, oh wow, I didn't really think of all of that. So the list is very long. I'm not going to do it all, but here are a few examples. Light bulbs that you use or might
Is this number one or is this the last one?
What do you mean?
Are you doing a countdown? Are you doing a top?
I'm not doing a countdown. There's no rhyme or reason to this order. It's just a list, so don't worry about it.
I just wish you would do more. I just wish you would do more countdowns because I think that it's better. It's people like countdowns. That's why everyone does them. People like top 10s, top 5s.
But there isn't. I mean, all right, top 4.
Top 4. There you go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Top 4. And
top 3. Let's do top 3.
Okay, and top 3 in no particular order. Okay, that way you're not saying there's any kind of favoritism or weight to these. These are all equally important, but these are the top 3 in biodiversity breakdown, right?
That's not what this is at all. Nope, that's not. So Antoine's not following along. So
okay.
So I'll dumb it down a little more.
A little more. All right, a little more. Top 3 in decanting corner.
So
take 2.
Top 3 reasons that we mine the earth. And it's not the top 3. There's no reason other than I thought these would be relevant, that people can understand that there might be minerals out there that we're using that no one's ever heard of, but that's maybe 90% of all mining. I have no idea. Did not do the research. I went through the list and was like, oh, we all know those, so I'm going to use these as examples. So light bulbs.
Top 3 reasons why we mine.
Stop trying to confuse the issue, Antoine. You're just confusing everything. Don't worry about the list. Don't worry about the countdown.
Okay.
Just get through this 3 bullet points. Let's get through these 3 bullets.
Gotcha.
All right. So again, why do we extract Earth's resources? Your light bulbs, right? If you're using certain types of light bulbs, they need aluminum, silicon, phosphor, gallium, copper. If you're reading books, that favorite book you have in your hand right now, it needs pigments, binders, and solvents. Those all come from minerals. And our smart devices, that needs cobalt and lithium, right? So all these different things, and there's so many more we take out of the earth, but just gives you an idea of how much we are extracting. And it's not just like one type of thing. It's not like iron makes this and like that's what it is. It's like such a compilation of different things that we're pulling that end up as an end result for our products that we use every day of our lives. But that last one, right, lithium, that brings us to our story. And the story is around what the article is calling green colonialism. So Nevada has an enormous deposit of lithium. And President Joe Biden wants it mined because it's critical to his vision for the US to be the world leader in electric cars. And they need lithium batteries. And Biden has explicitly said that he wants the lithium mined in the US so that we as a country can move away from importing nearly 100% of our lithium from places like Australia, Chile, and China. So what's the problem, right? Okay, so what we want.
Well, the problem is how much of that lithium, what percentage of that is coming from China? Because let's not what is it? Let's not pee on the listener and tell them it's rating. Okay, we're not afraid of cobalt coming from Australia. We're not afraid of cobalt coming from Chile.
That's not so much what the issue is. I mean, that could be part of an underlying thing of should we even be doing it, but that's kind of not the issue. So it's not so much we want to do it because it's made in America and we want to support jobs here. That isn't like what if that's what you're kind of gonna.
It's more about we don't want to be cut off or strangled by basically someone who could have nefarious nature with regard to the deal.
If we ever find ourselves in a conflict or
not just a conflict, but we just don't want to be squeezed at the mercy of another nation, because especially if we have the abundant
so a
resources.
matter of national security, right?
Well, there it is. There it is. That's the only thing that gets the old coffers pumping. Is it a matter of national security? And that's why we need to make schools a matter of national security. That way.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
and so whatever the reason is, right? And
it's national security. Let's just call it.
But that's what so that's what that is. I don't think actually that's even being contested. We don't want to rely on something so critical to this country's future, this country's energy future, because if we do all of a sudden convert everything to electric and we're not able to support our own batteries, then we are going to be very vulnerable, very exposed. So I get it, and I don't think anyone's actually contesting that. That's not what the problem is. The problem is, ironically, the controversy is within the environmental community itself, who are usually all on the same side of an issue like this. Lithium is causing a split between environmentalists and indigenous people. In March, Lithium Americas, which is a big company in the space, moved into a beautiful mountain pass to start digging for lithium years after legal battles. In one hand, you have the ecological devastation that mining causes that we just went through, that geodiversity, by destroying all that geodiversity in an area. And in the other hand, you have a critical component in electrifying the transportation industry and cutting carbon emissions. So as a reminder, transportation accounts for the largest portion of total US greenhouse gas emissions at 29%. Right, so this is a big, huge chunk. It's a big deal, electrifying transportation. So some environmentalists would say that we should mine the lithium. Others say that we should just drive less or use less items that require us to pull up these metals and minerals. I don't know how realistic that is.
Yeah, like biking, right? Biking, golf carts, I don't know, trains. Like
so
that.
In terms of drive less, like the mass transportation,
I was going after the drive.
They're also saying like all the stuff, like away from transportation, all the things that we are pulling up minerals for, that should be governed a little more.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So we listed light bulbs, smart devices, right? And there's a huge list there of products that require metals and minerals that we are extracting from this earth.
But none are as large as batteries that are required to run electric cars.
Transportation is 29% of the carbon emissions.
Yeah,
I don't know about metals used.
But I'm going to assume here. I think this is I feel like it's a good enough assumption to say that a bigger battery uses more minerals overall. I mean, it would be kind of wild if an iPhone and a Tesla have the same carbon footprint with regard to its like the creation of its lithium batteries.
From a one-to-one comparison, sure. I don't know, but if I don't know what the point you're actually trying to make, because the comment that the environmentalists made was that, yes, we can do mass transit, right? Drive less. And I assume that means mass transit or other modes of transportation. And fine, I guess then there it would be that, if we used less lithium ion batteries for electric vehicles, fine. But then their other comment was use less products that require mining. And that sounds like an enormous bucket. And that's because you compared iPhones to car batteries, and then that one-to-one, like I honestly don't know, because yes, a car battery versus a smart device, those two side by side, I imagine the car battery uses more just because it's bigger. But how many more phones are there than cars? I have no idea.
Yeah, well, that's that. I mean, of course, that's what you probably need to measure up in order to make the true comparison. But I'm just going to go out on a limb, and knowing the size, or at least I know what I know of a Tesla battery. I mean, you're probably looking at. You're right. I mean, I don't want to throw out a number, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like 1,000 phones to each Tesla battery kind of thing, because a phone's battery is so much. I mean, it's just a lot less material than what you would need to run a electric vehicle. That's all I'm getting at.
All right. Well, not to get bogged down on that.
No, it's not too bogged down. I'm just saying that's important. It's important.
Yes, it is. It's important to know that the electric vehicles themselves require significant lithium, if not other materials, but lithium specifically, because that's the focus of here.
I guess what I'm getting at is just to say that if you were to go at it with a solution, the easier solution is to drive less than to necessarily say we need to like cut back on overall products using lithium batteries. Because I'm just saying, if there's one product in particular that is like an outlier in terms of how much lithium is required to run it, I would figure you go after that as opposed to just saying we have to go after the entire market. I feel like you'd make
I don't know, but I don't know, but I mean, it's centered around lithium because of the next part I was just about to get to, because there is this conflict. But if you did say, okay, you know what, we're not going to mine that lithium, and because we don't want to be dependent, we're not going to switch to EVs. Instead, we're going to invest in mass transit infrastructure, and let's just say that for whatever reason that doesn't require lithium batteries, which I have no idea how that works. I don't know what materials that needs, and is that going to be a whole nother thing? Okay, it's not lithium now, it's this thing.
Okay,
I have no idea.
That's fair.
So I don't want to get too bogged down in that, but the next point that I was going to make is, okay, you heard the environmentalists don't really have so much of an issue with this, or they have at least some other areas we could explore. Indigenous peoples in the area, in this specific area where this lithium deposit is, were chased here in 1865, where they were massacred by the U.S. cavalry. And they say it's a historical site. And while the land is owned by the Bureau of Land Management, the tribes say it has been stolen from local people, and that local members should get to decide how it is used instead of corporations making those decisions. Lithium Americas argues that there is no evidence that the massacre happened on this site, and that's the court battle that they won, which gave them approval to go dig. In the eyes of the tribes, this is a textbook example of Native people being ignored, this time in the name of preventing climate change, and they're calling it green colonialism. The mine itself is in its infancy, not much has happened yet, and the tribes fear that this is just the beginning, and they're right. Lithium Americas is clear about their ambition, and they're not the only player in the space. More will come to this area. They don't own the whole lithium deposit. And this is a quote from the company, there has to be more lithium in the United States if it's going to be self-sufficient. There has to be more development. And that means that this entire beautiful mountain pass, all of the geodiversity, all of the biodiversity will be lost to save the planet. That's the kind of the positioning of this. And I don't really know where to go from there.
Jamie. I know. Well, I think that's really strange. I mean, America's not known for sacrificing native peoples for its own ambitions. It's like a unique development. I mean,
21st century problem.
Yeah. It's just, I guess it's, we've never done that before. We've never decided that we needed gold, and there were native peoples in the way, and those people needed to be moved aside in order to get at that gold. That's an interesting thing that's happened. I mean, I guess that did happen though, didn't it, Jamie? That did happen. So this has happened before. In fact, maybe we have a pattern of this.
That's what they're saying.
There's a pattern of this, huh? And it's interesting. The court was like, "Hey, there is a pattern of this from a historical standpoint."
But you can't prove that this is the site that this atrocity happened on, so no big deal.
Well, I do think that's wild that there's a story passed down by the tribe, and yet there are no historians that were available for this trial to back up what they're saying. I mean, that's interesting. That is I just feel like there's a historian for everything, and even tribes probably have their own historians, accredited historians. I'm surprised that there was not a historical record of this particular slaughter. Even I mean, because I'm saying the cavalry. The U.S. military is fraught with deception, especially during this era, and propaganda in terms of moving Native Americans out of the way in order to get at homesteads and take the land out west because of our manifest destiny. This is what you learn very early on in American schooling. One of the first things you learn is a manifest destiny without the other half of that coin, which is all the people that had to die.
Yeah.
In order for that manifest destiny to manifest.
Very romanticized.
Yeah. Incorrect. Yeah. That's a freaking understatement. That's a fracking understatement. But along with that, I'm just shocked that there were no military records at all of that massacre. There were no military records of the incursion, no military records of military patrols at the time that were stationed near this town.
I also don't know how precise it has to be. It's not like the military had, a GPS signal and they're like, these are the coordinates for this massacre. Like the lithium deposit is probably on a very specific spot. And they're like, we're going to mine here. And if it's like 20 miles somewhere, I guess they could argue it could have been here. It could have been 10, 20 miles away, and in this vast mountain pass, it, 20 miles may sound like a lot, but it's probably not.
No.
Or and I'm making that up. It could be.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying.
And so, like, these legal teams for these major corporations, especially in energy and mining, these are very wealthy companies, and they can make very good arguments, I'm sure. And this isn't their first rodeo. So,
it's a funny thing too. There's actually, and I'm not going to get too off topic with this, but there have been a lot of interesting articles I've read, basically chiding the modern American justice system with judges in these particular issues of historical context, because the way judges sort of act and preach, it's as if they are historians, and they are not. And they basically, you're not taught in law school necessarily the context of, like, the historical context for when a particular ruling was enacted, or like in terms of just how people lived, how people might have viewed their world. Without that nuance, you can make a lot of mistakes as a judge. Now, I'm not saying that any of that happened in this particular instance, but it's interesting to see a tribe lose based on this historical event. And then to also just, an American, legal system combined with the corporations were able to win out. Exactly. It might be on a technicality like that, where they're like, well, the actual people died 6 miles from here, and therefore that's enough space because of the way we look at land use, as opposed to the way that the Native Americans might have looked at land use. They might have said that this is still on that land. The people might not have been murdered here, but this is part of where that settlement either, hunted or did some sort of ceremony. And because they were killed, the ceremony could no longer be, take place over here. So it's all intertwined. It could be something like that.
They weren't airdropped into this slaughter. They were chased. So it probably is like this route. And then, let's be honest. You don't want a 50 by 50 square of atrocity historical sites surrounded by mined land. I mean, that's ridiculous. So
well, there you go. Exactly. Something like that.
Wow. Yeah. Now, I wanted to just kind of put that aside, because I think we all know that there's that issue, and you did a really good job calling it out. But if there is this looming cloud of climate change, and we need to hit net zero by 2050, and like 45% or something like that by 2030, and this could potentially negate 29% of our carbon emissions if we can switch over to electric. That's one way to do it. And the thing that's getting in the way of that, so that we don't make ourselves vulnerable to other nations, is mining the lithium in our own country. And this is the deposit where that has to happen. Would that then say, okay, cool, sorry about repeating history, but we got to do this? Or does that then compel you to do research in other areas and say, like, yeah, we can switch over to EVs. Maybe that's not the sole solution, because we're not going to be able to mine as much lithium at home as we had thought, and we don't want to make ourselves vulnerable. So we are going to have to look at national infrastructure that is more sustainable, and look at mass transit or some other things to do it. Like where do you go from here? Because if that is the argument being made, that like this is going to happen, this has to happen, to mandate from the executive, this is the direction that we're going, and this is our best bet to cut carbon emissions. So what do we do with that?
Well, I mean, I think we know it's not our best bet. I mean, I think we could already suss out that this is probably the most profitable way of combating climate change. It's the way that a corporation can make a lot of money while offsetting our carbon, our basically our
footprint. That up before. How do you make things happen? You got to get them on board, unless you mandate someone.
Well, I think that again, the sacrifice we could make, we know full well that as a society we could make far more sacrifices of ourselves as like everyday Americans with regard to the way our government is either distributing money towards public transport or infrastructure, or just sort of rejigging the way that our cities are built, or the way that we develop for our suburbs. Right now, I know there are suburban developments being developed all over this country. Those kinds of contracts, all those things can be rescinded, and we could funnel those into more sustainable methods of living and building out our society. But that requires sacrifice without profitability. This clearly is something that is profitable, something that is quite lucrative, that corporations are quite keen on, and the sacrifice that is with this one, like this, I'm sure it's being channeled as there's only one way to do this, which is sort of the way you were reading it from the pieces, the articles that you're citing, is that, oh, this is awful. I'm so sorry. You native peoples must sacrifice once again for the good of the nation. Because this is the only way, and we know it's not. We know darn
well,
to
some
right
environmentalists
that
have
it's
said
not.
that, right? We
know there are other
less,
ways to do this.
We can use products. We can
there's
change
tons
our
of things
product
we
usage.
We can make real sacrifices across the board. And so we know that we don't have to do this. We're going to choose to do this because it is the most profitable thing to do, and it is the easiest thing to do for either a president that wants to win re-election, wants support from various corporations, wants to give out more government contracts in order to get that sweet election money from these companies that are going to benefit from those contracts. There's all sorts of things that are in the pocket of promoting and why a politician or the companies are going to go down this route, but that is nowhere near the only solution. It probably isn't even at the top of the best solutions. I'm going to go out there on a limb. Retraction, get at me, get at us. Let us know what the best solution is. If this really is the best solution, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and just go out on a limb and say it's probably not. And yeah, it's fine because we're sacrificing a minority and it's not affecting the majority, and it's not affecting the profitability of a corporation. That's my sense. That's my sense of what you're putting down.
So to play devil's advocate to this, and I was like debating on whether or not I should even ask this question. If this was the way to go, right? If for whatever reason it's the most feasible, practical for the world that we live in today, how much should beliefs stand in the way of that? So this is a historical site because of a past event. How much of that needs to be preserved? And to what degree does that stand in the way of resource allocation?
I would say that as much as the tribe is requesting needs to be preserved, and if it's all of it, then it's all of it, because this is not this is the type of sacrifice we should be making. The sacrifice of foregoing profit in order to go another route. There are other things that we can do. We know it. We talk about it all the time. We do not. I would bet 1,010% that we do not need this particular lithium mine if we are not continuing to be a car-centric nation, which we should not be. We should not continue to go
electric
down this
or
route.
Otherwise, we should not be a car nation.
We should not be a car-centric nation. And if you're then at that point, and here's the big argument. This is where I'm going to come from. You please feel free to rebut. We need cars individually require these lithium batteries. If you were not divvying up lithium batteries per car, and instead, let's say we were running electric trains and those trains now needed those batteries, I would venture to say that you would need overall less lithium, because running a train, you're carrying more people, and if you're not divvying it up to be sold with each electric vehicle, and that we're not just talking about Teslas, because this is going to be a lot of car manufacturers across the board.
Wouldn't you have to displace more people, though? Because to be able to replace cars, you're not going to be able to use existing lines. You're going to have to make more. You've seen the maps. You showed them.
Nope. That's a completely different conversation. It's a different conversation, because they've already drawn up plans. You could use the existing highway structure. You could build right alongside the highways. That there are plans out there for that. So that is one way to do it. But that's not really
highways. There's not enough highways to replace cars where people could have access to public transport.
There are enough main highways apparently that hit the major cities, because that's the initial highway. Like
screw everyone else.
Well, what do you mean? The highway is already taken care of. The land around the highway, people don't usually live right alongside a highway. So I mean, I'm just saying, on the average, there are avenues we can take with regard to,
and that's where people just have to get used to, okay, you live a mile or so away, you're gonna have to bike it.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, you're gonna want to bike it, because the time it took you to get from Boston to New York, instead of the 7-hour, 6-hour hellish commute during at peak traffic, it was only 2.5 hours with like real rail. And we're not talking about the rail we currently have in this country. We're talking about like Japanese rail, like actual trains of the modern era. You're doing the trip in like an hour and a half. There are people, basically at that point, there are people who could live in Boston and work in New York. I mean, I'd rather a remote working future, but so I'm not really a big advocate for that. But if people want to continue the office approach with the digital age, by all means, you at that level, you could live in a DC and work in New York. You could live in New York and work in Boston. It's just it's a 2-hour round trip commute, which is what people are doing in their cars anyway. There are a lot of things that can be done, but I don't want to derail the conversation getting into how infrastructure, what we can do with infrastructure. All we need to say is there are alternatives. They are completely within our future. We could invest in them and they make them a reality. But what we want to do instead is continue the profitability of car manufacturers and anyone who has to gain from providing those cars with the most modern fuel, which at this point will be electric, lithium batteries, and electricity, because they need charging stations. We're choosing to go down this route because cars mean freedom in America, which is just so absurdly. There are words I want to give, but because we like to keep it friendly, we don't want to get into the bowels of English vernacular with regard to some of these choice phrases. I'm just going to keep saying that there are better things to do, and we do not have to go down this route. So that's what I have to say.
And we get to keep the geodiversity.
And we get to keep the geodiversity, and we don't have to spit in the face of native peoples, and we get to sing Kumbaya. And the only people who are upset are massive conglomerate corporations that stood to rake in ridiculous amounts of profit, once again on the backs of suffering, because that's normally how this goes. And instead of saying someone has to suffer, we can all spread out the sacrifice so that it's not so injurious. It's not like you don't feel so oppressed with regard to the suffering. It's like, okay, you're not getting your electric car. There are people who refuse to buy electric cars because they're just like, I want gas cars. I love gas. Well, they're into the indoctrination. Leave those people doing whatever they want. Gas can go to $20 a gallon. They can figure out their lives. Alternative routes, biking, trains, buses, a more sustainable future, because we're going to get to a point where this is now going to be unsustainable. Cars with oil was unsustainable. Electric vehicles will probably become unsustainable. And the thing is, you need oil to do certain types of mining and to actually extract, because again, electricity for the charging stations, the batteries is one thing, but then you have to charge them, and a lot of electricity still comes from coal.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there is still oil used in terms of building out certain renewable energies, because
fossil fuels are still
right
the primary source of energy to even develop sustainable technology,
exactly.
Which is always what gets thrown in people's faces, but it's still less fossil fuels overall.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Don't let people say that to you, like, that doesn't mean it's all bad and it's a joke.
This is true. Absolutely. It is still less overall, but I'm just saying it becomes significant when you're talking about asking a people to sacrifice for this pursuit. I mean, it's still a spit in the face. I was just saying, at the very least, the company could say, all right, this horrible travesty that occurred here, we're gonna get you in on this deal. For every whatever amount of lithium that's in, the tribe gets 16 cents or something. It's like they get a percentage split in order to make amends for having to do this. But I mean, that's still such a spit in the face. I mean, who it's like, we're sorry we killed your whole family, but guess what? We're gonna cut you in.
Well, that would be the government. That's the U.S. cavalry that did that. The
I'm saying
wants the lithium.
Yeah, but
they could cut them in on the profits.
That's
and the government could do something.
Well, the government, right? Exactly.
And you could see that being taken as you can't buy me off. But I don't know how. I could see arguments being made like, how sustainable is it to preserve all these areas? But I guess it's a big country and a lot of land, and there are alternatives. There are alternatives. It's one thing if you're going to believe the propaganda and you're going to position it to make people feel like there aren't alternatives. But most reasoned people know, because the information is well public, that there are alternatives. There was that cool map that we referenced it when Amtrak was in the news, and it's not the Build Back Better bill. It was some bill under Biden where he gave a ridiculous amount of money to Amtrak. Not a ridiculous, because it's really not enough, but
people were coming. There was like Twitter was a flood with that huge map that showed rail all over the country, because that map was completely doable. It had rail at every corner. I mean, I'm not even saying rail is the solution. All I'm saying is that there are reasonable alternatives that would not put people out. The fact that everyone wants to buy a car and drive 2 miles to the grocery store, that's just a change in culture. At some point, the sacrifice has to be made. Are we going to make the sacrifice, or are we going to impose the sacrifice on minorities? And tried and true with this country's history, most people are fine with imposing the sacrifice on minorities. That's what we're going to go with, because that's what we know.
I'm pretty sure it's happening.
Yeah, like, that's what we know. So I mean, but we should at least be aware of it. That's the thing. It's like, if you're going to do it, everyone should at least say, hey, yeah, we're spitting in their face because I want to drive 3 miles. I don't want to have to take some sort of public transport to do my everyday chores. I don't want to take public transport to get to my job. I don't want my city built around public transport. I want to drive. I want my freedom. And I don't care who loses out on it, because this is about me. At least if we can be honest about it. I wish that was the conversation that we have in the debates, instead of coding it and masking the conversation and going about it in this rigmarole way, make it gaslighting. That's what we do. We gaslight minorities. We gaslight these people to say, this is the only way. I'm sorry you have to make this sacrifice. There's no other alternative. And they know there is. And I know there is. And most reasoned people know there is. At least be honest with those, saying, look, we don't give a frack about you. People want to drive. I'm sorry. This is what has to happen. We just don't care. We don't care about you. We don't care about anybody. We care about the people who are going to elect me at the next cycle. And I care about the corporations who are going to also help that happen. I just don't care about you. I just wish that we could just be honest. Just be honest. Be real. We don't care about you. Just say it. Say it to their faces so that they feel better. At least they know that they're right in their anger, as opposed to trying to dissuade them and be like, why are they so angry? We did the best we could. No, they're angry because you're peeing on them. You're telling them it's raining. You're gaslighting them, and treat them like human beings. They just say, look, I'm sorry this happened. We don't care. We what I care about is getting these lithium batteries. Papa needs new batteries. That's you just say it. Just be honest. Don't need to lie.
Yeah, I mean, just basically say there's no argument you could make that'll change my mind. I want these.
Exactly. Be honest. Be honest.
All right. So that was that. Thought it was an interesting topic. Wanted to raise awareness.
I thought it was really cool.
Indigenous
really cool
people and geodiversity.
Those are always, it's a 1-2 punch. It's always the way of things in this country. I wish it
always feels like a gut punch for some reason. It's rare that it's a good story.
Yeah, usually it isn't. As soon as you bring up indigenous peoples in the government, it's usually going to be a negative story, unfortunately. Which should say something, which you should take into account. If you're trying to be just, we have a justice system. The court system shouldn't be meringued or allowed their hand to be played by slick lawyers who are being hired by a corporation. Maybe they should just take a step back and say, hey, this is really familiar. We've been here before. Because we've been here before, we're going to take a special look at this and analyze it in a different frame, as opposed to the way that
instead of just saying, wow, these people are wrong a lot. They're always wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've been wrong for generations. I don't get it. What's their deal?
What is their deal? Why'd they put themselves on these reservations? I just don't get it. I was like, Harry, can you explain it to me? Why are they doing this? These silly
what agreements are they talking about?
Silly people.
Yeah. No, it's terrible.
Yeah.
All right. What do you got?
Now This Earth. Picked this up on their they did a YouTube post. A new report has labeled 20 countries as planet wreckers, with the United States being called planet wrecker in chief. As
really?
It makes up
number one?
We are number one.
Oh, wow.
We did it.
I thought we were like number two. Wow, number one, huh?
It says...
What factors?
We make up a third of planned global oil and gas expansion through 2050. The report found that 20 countries will be responsible for almost 90% of carbon dioxide emissions from new fossil fuel projects between 2023 and 2050.
Wow, look at us staying on top.
We like to win when it matters.
How many countries?
It said 20 countries.
20 countries make up a third of everything.
20 countries make up 90% of the carbon dioxide.
90, huh? Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
It's funny that they had I wonder if they wanted to just get to that 90% number and it happened to be 20, or it's like less than 20 and that puts us at like 80% or something. I'd be curious to see like how that all shakes out, because 20 is a lot. 20 countries is a lot. I guess it's like the empires and
north.
Then I was gonna say the empires and then their resource fiefdoms.
Basically,
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever they're pressing for their resources. Yeah.
I mean, it's a really small note. I don't know if there's a lot to to really go on about it. I just thought it was interesting. It's just another little tidbit.
So I mean, is number 2 China?
I assume so. I mean, I would assume it's because of the planning. It's because of the planning, despite, and we talked about this a little bit, despite Biden's efforts to stymie that. Yeah, it's continued. So that's the issue. It's the planning.
Well, I mean, his efforts aside, other countries are already doing it, and they're not as big of emitters as us. That's why I'm surprised at the China thing, though, because I had thought, especially if we're on track to cut by like 43% by 2030, that we would still be number 1. Wow, are we just that bad to begin with? And this is only carbon emissions, right?
It's gas expansion. It's global oil and gas expansion. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing is like we're talking in percentages.
Yeah.
But if the volumes are still big enough where our 30%, our 45% works, someone else's 90% or however that works. That could be part of it. I wonder.
I mean, I didn't want to make this episode where we're just like completely poo-pooing our country of residents, although we're allowed to do that. That's the other thing of this. If anyone's listening, as an American, you're allowed to criticize the country. That's the difference between living here and living in a place with a despot that with some sort of secret police that's going to
poisons you, throws you out a window.
Oh well, I mean, accidental falls out of the 4th floor window are just it's probably the leading cause of death for Russians. We're allowed to do that. It doesn't make you unpatriotic. I want other people to know that. If anything, I always think it makes you more patriotic because you're asking more. You're saying this country has so much potential, and with that potential, we could do so much because we're so powerful. The least we should be doing is leading the charge in the places that matter, and it becomes disappointing when you have a country that is this size, with this much power, with this much weight on the international community, and we are number 1 in something like derailing climate initiative or basically making the planet a better place. That's what disappoints people, and I think it's worth saying. It doesn't make you not like the country. It just means that you want it to be better, and the only way you're going to make it better is by sounding the alarm and telling people that, hey, we're not doing the right thing. Pretending like we're nothing but rainbows, honey, and cherry doesn't make us better. It makes us complacent, and it makes us double down on being worse.
It also makes us lose. If you think you're exceptional across the board with no metric to measure that claim, and you ignore any bad news story that's contrary to that claim, you're going to lose. Because at some point, no one cares what you think because you've been eclipsed. We are not able to compete if we don't know where we went wrong. Sports. People love sports here. Go watch your highlight. Go watch your film reels, your game reels. Figure out what we did wrong. We don't do that. I mean, how do you compete? How do you compete if you can't critique yourself?
That's really good stuff. You're absolutely right. If you went to any football coach, anybody who's ever done team sport and said, wait, you never watched the games where you lose? You say, no. We only watch the games where we win.
I never lose. What are you talking about?
I guess you could be delusional. But
which is what we are, though.
Yeah, that's not.
We are delusional. Like at this point, if this was the analogy, we'd be like, we're refs. It was a game. We just play and we win. We just win. We win. I don't know how many games there are. We just win. We just win everything. We're amazing. We win. Like, that's what it is. It's so silly. It's just, they ignore the game. Try to go, all right, just take academics. We're like 30th, 20 something in math and science and all these things. Like, if we're not educating our population, how do you think that we are overperforming elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a good point.
What is it? We don't educate people, and then all of a sudden they go out and do wonderful things? That doesn't happen. Thankfully, we let people into this country where they do wonderful things, and then you have a portion of the country that has the money to go get educated. They do wonderful things.
I don't know. I don't want to break it to you, but Einstein was an immigrant. I want to say that's probably been our MO for longer than we'd care to admit. So it's I don't know if that's necessarily making the point that you're trying to make. We've relied an enormous amount on not necessarily homegrown education, but people who've come to this country and been very
that's
brilliant.
Just it though. That's what I'm saying. Like it's that's like our one saving grace, which we're actively trying to dismantle now. We're not letting smart people in, and we're not making ourselves smart.
Now we're cutting ourselves. Yeah, now we're cutting ourselves. Yeah, now we're doing what we've always done, except we've stopped letting smart people in. Yeah, you're right. Now that's a precarious situation that you don't necessarily want to find yourself in on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. Anyway, the whole American exceptionalism thing is. I think there's a clip from a show that I never watched, but who's the guy from Dumb and Dumber? Jeff Daniels, is that his name?
Yeah. Jeff Daniels.
And I think the question is posed to him, and his answer is entertaining. I don't know if you've ever seen it, if you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, the newsroom?
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah. Well, he's
like on a stage.
He's on a stage because he's at a college, and he's like a news producer or something like that, and like a storied one in the industry. And it's a bunch of like. They're supposed to be at some sort of Ivy League, and one of the students gets up and asks the question about what makes America so amazing, and then he gives a canned answer. That he looks off to some, I don't know, I can't remember who this person is to him, and then he changes his answer and is like, "We're like number 30th in terms of like mothers who die giving birth, and like 80th in terms of reading, math, like all these other statistics." So he's like, "What are you talking about when you talk about American exceptionalism? Where's it coming from?" It's like your deluded sense of self, basically.
Under what metrics? Like, how are you measuring? Define exceptionalism, and then show me the data. Like, I don't. We're optimists, I guess.
Oh yeah, you're what is it? Incorrigible optimist. That's basically our export at this point. Which is it's been our export for a long time. We love to export optimism. I will say that the newsroom, I wanted to love that series, but it was a little too preachy. They needed to dial it back in the way that the what was that series? It was like Aaron Sorkin who did it. And what was the series before the newsroom? It was really popular in the 90s. It was with the president. He was like a real progressive.
Like is it like West Wing?
West Wing. That's it. Yep.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it. But that was Charlie Sheen's dad, right?
Yes.
Martin.
Maybe Martin Sheen. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
But
yeah. He was the president.
He didn't go Estevez. He went Sheen, I think. The dad.
I think so. Yeah. He definitely did. Yeah, he went Sheen.
Okay.
But so it's like the liberal dream of the 90s was the West Wing, and the newsroom was a little heavy-handed as opposed to taking the every other episode there was a big grandiose speech like that, but with the newsroom it was like every episode was like if you can't see the writing on the wall to be an eternal progressive, then we don't really know what to do with you. That was kind of the way it was shaking out, which I just think was a little too divisive, even for a show that was not supposed to be bringing in conservatives necessarily to watch it. So, different era. It was a different time.
It's a different time.
It's a different time. That was a different world pre-COVID. So, anyway.
Yeah. What happened during COVID? Was it just the forced indoctrination, people being stuck in their house and have nothing to watch but Fox News?
That's part of it. It's the fact that social media doesn't do anything to at least at the time, didn't do anything to bellwether truth versus fiction. And I think that it's a poor attempt at it by posting to the Wikipedia page. Every time we mention climate change, we get the YouTube. This is the Wikipedia on climate change. I don't know if that's necessarily.
It's the UN. I think it's the UN, but you know,
whatever. It doesn't. It's sort of like that's not.
It's not
You got a
changing
video.
anyone.
You got a video that's being compelling. It's got like 600,000 views, and it's all about climate change is a hoax, and this is what the deep state is doing. And you think that those people are then going to click through to a UN document and read it and say,
They
"Oh,
think the UN's in on it." That's
yeah."
the deep
Well,
state, right?
half the video is about that, and then
Yeah.
you're supposed to go in and say, "Oh yeah, oh the deep state. Oh that's wrong."
There's people
I
in
see,
the video pointing down at
pointing
the UN
down.
warning.
saying, "You see this climate change thing? It's a hoax. They're in on it." Yeah, I mean it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, and it doesn't do much if you're. It doesn't matter. It's this thing is if you're talking about climate change as if it doesn't exist, you get the message. And if you are promoting it to say that, hey, climate change is a real thing, these are ways that we can prevent it, these are all things, you still get it. So it's basically telling people that this is just something you're just putting that I can ignore because it doesn't actually mean anything. Because whether you're getting disinformation or you're getting information, you're getting the exact same message.
It's
so
not for anyone. It's like
that's what I'm saying. It's not for anybody.
Before the movies, either you're gonna record it and sell it and you don't care, or you're not and you don't care. It's
there you go.
It doesn't matter to anyone.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So
Maybe for someone who never heard of climate change, and what are they, like 14 years old? They just got the internet and they go on. They're like, "What is this climate change thing?" And
they're 6. They're 6, and it's their first iPad. And they're just like, "What is this thing? This climate crisis? Let me inform myself."
That's who it's for.
Yeah, basically.
It's a long game.
Jay, where can they find us? Can they find us on Blue Sky?
You can find us on Blue Sky if you're on Blue Sky, if you've gotten the invite. We have not been on there long enough to give out invites, but as soon as we are, we will raffle them off to the highest bidder.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. Okay. All right. So,
we get for every like, we give out Blue Sky tickets. Tickets to the show.
Tickets to the show. Yes. That's exactly what we're going to do. All right. So you can find us every week, Fridays, full episodes. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to share. Do all those things.
Like, subscribe,
subscribe, share. If there's something more than a like, you can rate us on Apple, I think.
Comment, critique. That's why the show's called Retraction. We will retract. We say it all the time. Like, look, if you think that something we said you don't agree with it, that's what we're here for. We want to hear that.
We get called out sometimes. It happens.
And we try to, and we talk about it on the show. What we do most of the time, especially if it's well reasoned and it's not just like, someone carving poop out of their toilet and throwing it in the comment section. We're all about it. They're all about it.
There you go.
Yeah. So, with that, Retraction out.